Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron Ogti and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
Hi, my name is Aaron Ogti. I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area. I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast. And today we have a guest, David Shapiro, an AI communicator, writer, YouTuber, to discuss AI and how to prepare for the fourth industrial revolution.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here, David. And thanks for everybody for listening and watching.
This is going to be I hope it's a fun conversation. This could get really practical, could get really esoteric. I don't know where this is quite going to go, but we're going to try and let David give us as much information on AI, and Trishul and I have a few questions prepared. But before we get to there, David, you want to give us an intro on your journey, kind of how you got to where you are today?
Sure, yeah. Elevator pitch version is I started my IT career back in 2007. 2009, I started tinkering with AI kind of on a hobby basis. Fast forward to 2015, 2016, that's when kind of the deep learning launch began. And by then, I was an infrastructure engineer and automation engineer. Fast forward to about 3 or 4 years ago, and I made the jump to, I started consulting on AI, and then 2 years ago, I made the switch to be a full-time consultant on artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI. And I was building my YouTube channel, my brand, my writing, and now that's what I do full-time. I don't even really do consulting anymore.
Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction. So kind of considering that, do you want to give us, Trishul, I find when we talk about AI, we have to be specific of our definitions kind of thing. Do you want to give us a little more specificity on AI as you see it and define it for I think there's a general AI that we're not quite at, Trishul better with the lingo than I am, but do you want to give us kind of some base definitions that will likely come up in this conversation?
Yeah, sure. And so when I personally, colloquially, when I use AI now, what I mean is the collection of technologies that are slowly expanding to the threshold of human capability. Now, in some cases, machines have far exceeded human capability, and in many cases, they're lagging very far behind. But it really is a cluster or a collection of different technologies, whether it is audio recognition or speech synthesis or text generation or image understanding. These are all interrelated, similar, parallel technologies, but just because they're parallel doesn't mean they're exactly the same thing. But they're also building blocks. They're building blocks of software components, hardware components that can be integrated into larger systems, larger architectures that will be able to basically create the next generation of, whether it's Commander Data or, the computer from Star Trek or whatever. Those are the kinds of things we're working up towards. We're obviously not there yet, but we're now on the path in that direction.
I actually had Commander Data as one of my super specific data points. So I actually had that ready for that. So I kind of appreciate that, because I do think that is a good science fiction example of what people think of when they hear AI that we're not even close to yet.
Right. We're closer than some people think. We're not as close as other people think, but we are much closer than many people think.
Okay, I'll save that question. Okay, so what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the way that I describe it is okay. So think of it, 50s, 60s, 70s. Moore's law. We had integrated circuits. Lithography-based etching of CPUs. That transition from analog to digital was the first major computational paradigm shift. And since then, computational power has been doubling every 12 to 36 months, depending on who you talk to and how you measure it exactly. But it has been going up exponentially for several decades now. And what we invented back, I mentioned how I kind of dipped back into artificial intelligence back in 2015, 2016. That is when some of the mathematical advancements, some of the algorithmic breakthroughs set the stage for what is now generative AI, deep neural networks, and transformer architecture. And the transformer architecture has proven to be very, very universal, very robust. And so personally, my view is that is the next generation CPU. That is the fundamental building block of pretty much everything from here until AGI, possibly superintelligence or whatever. There might be a few other architectures, but we are nowhere near the ceiling of what this particular architecture is capable of doing. In the same way that the von Neumann architecture of CPU, memory processing, and registers and storage, that we understand that paradigm very, very well. But this new computing paradigm is very, very new, and I mean the sky's the limit with how far this can take us. Now, is it going to be the final paradigm? I doubt it. There's probably plenty of other undiscovered computational paradigms, but this is the fundamental building block for the next few decades.
So, David, just to put this in the larger context, maybe this might tie into the fourth industrial revolution. Do you kind of see it as, maybe the first industrial revolution is 1800s, we just start using machines in some capacity, and then the second industrial revolution, maybe it's like the Henry Ford with the assembly line, right? Things like that. And then third is what you just mentioned, transistors, right? Coming of age and the acceleration there with Moore's law. And it sounds like the fourth industrial revolution is this fourth stage where now we might see this Moore's law type of growth in transistor architecture. Is that a way to put it?
Yeah. So one thing to understand about the fourth industrial revolution is that AI might be the leading indicator. It could even be the keystone technology, but we actually have several technologies that are all going to be feeding off of each other. So that's artificial intelligence, which is stuff you can do with computers, quantum computing, go ahead.
Getting back to that definition, what is the difference that we see right now between machine learning and AI? It's like, when I use Grain to do a real-time transcript and then generate notes, that feels like a machine learning thing, but do you have a distinction there?
There are technically distinctions between machine learning and artificial intelligence. One way that I kind of tend to think of it, if someone says machine learning, that tends to be either numerical prediction, so modeling or forecasting, or regression, which is kind of fitting just strictly a mathematical model to something like determining house prices or forecasting stock market or even weather data. Now, technically, though, even generative AI is all still just machine learning because it's all just mathematical modeling of text or images or whatever. So depending on how pure you want to be, it's all the same thing. It's all math kind of at the end of the day. It's just how do you package it? It's kind of the distinction there.
So go on. Fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah. So fourth industrial revolution is the confluence of many, many technologies. So we've got nanotech, biotech, quantum computing on the horizon, nuclear fusion on the horizon, genetic medicine, all of this being accelerated by, and in some cases, feeding back in a positive feedback loop, accelerating artificial intelligence. So for instance, artificial intelligence can help accelerate chip design and material science, which then makes better chips. And so you have this snowball effect. And this is one of the things so it's not just one exponential curve, it's actually several exponential curves all kind of interacting, which basically means that it becomes less and less predictable the more kind of complex the system becomes.
But it does seem like the one exponential curve that we might want to worry about the worst or the most is that acceleration of generalized intelligence to super intelligence to, oh boy, now what happens?
Yeah, no, I would agree that represents, if you just want to look at it from a purely mathematical modeling perspective, each increment of machine capability expands the number of options that machines have. It's the number of paths that it can take, the number of choices that it can make, the number of problems that it can solve. the number of barriers that it can overcome. And as that threshold rises, the number of options increases. I don't know if it increases exponentially, but as the machine capability goes up, so too do the number of options, the number of possible choices, and number of possible futures. And that's what makes it less and less predictable. And that's what a lot of people are afraid of. That's why some people say, well, in that possibility space, some of those potential outcomes are, humans get eradicated, or we accidentally start a nuclear war or something. I'm personally not too much in the X risk factor. I do believe that there is some risk, but there's also, there's literally millions of people around the planet working to prevent that. So I think we're probably going to be okay. That's not to say that it's over and done with, but just thinking of it in terms of the number of possible futures goes up with time. That's what causes some people anxiety.
Do you mind explaining or giving us an example of those millions of people working to prevent that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are just from my own space, there's plenty of communicators. I'm friends with some of the biggest other YouTubers and other communicators. I talk to researchers and students all the time. I've partnered with, well, not partnered, but I collaborate with Clemson, the Human AI Empowerment Lab. I don't do consulting anymore, but I have consulted with researchers all over the planet. There's plenty of independent researchers out there, other commentators who are kind of raising awareness on X risk. There's tens and thousands of engineers working inside private companies, and so globally, I would anticipate that there are probably several million people working on specifically AI safety globally.
Okay. But to add on that, it seems like there's two key issues with safety in my mind. One is, probably the alignment problem, something we've talked about in the past. How do we know that the AI, once it reaches super intelligence, aligns with the best interests of humans? I think that's one thing. But also there's the notion of, well, now we're going to have this super intelligent capability that literally billions of people will have access to. How do we know that some lone actor can't take that capability and use it for nefarious means if it's that ubiquitous? I think maybe
Sure.
Each of those present worrying concerns to me. And do you think both of these are being addressed?
So the short answer is yes, both of them are being addressed, and also they're not solved yet. So one way that I tend to think about this is whether you realize it or not, you already live in a world with a super intelligence. It's the internet. So the internet is a superorganism. It is the aggregate demands of billions of servers and people around the world all working together in this fog computing, right, where there's no one entity that's in control of the whole thing. The internet has emergent desires that it wants. The internet wants your attention. And as a superorganism, what did the internet do to get your attention? It invented social media. It invented Netflix. It invented all kinds of other stuff. It invented memes as we understand them today. That was the result of a globe-spanning intelligence that already exists today. But this global intelligence is basically as smart as an amoeba. All it's doing is eating and consuming. It just wants data because that's what the internet is optimized for. So now what we're doing, because again, we already live in this era of superintelligence, it's just kind of, a little bit amoeba-like. So then what we're doing is we're adding a layer of intelligence. It's kind of like the difference between in the human, where you've got the reptilian low brain and then the mammalian midbrain. What we're doing with artificial intelligence now is we're adding the mammalian midbrain to the global nervous system. So the internet will be a little bit more conscious in the future. And I don't mean that in a philosophical sense, but I mean that it will be more deliberative in what it does, where it decides to allocate time, energy, and resources. And then as we approach, superintelligence, then we'll have that prefrontal cortex version of the global digital brain that will say, oh, hey, now that we're actually fully aware and awake, and again, I don't mean that in a philosophical sense, but I mean that in a functional sense, the global digital superorganism will be able to make more conscientious decisions that align with whatever beneficent purposes or instrumental purposes it might have, such as investing in solar and energy, because those are resource constraints that both humans and machines will need addressed. Getting off planet, because there's infinitely more resources out in space than there are here on Earth. So there's a lot of alignment, just natural alignment. This is what I call axiomatic alignment, in that humans and machines, we have a lot of needs in common, and we don't really necessarily have to step on each other's toes. So if you remove resource contention, because resource contention is one of the most like pragmatic things that might say, hey, you humans are really expensive to feed. I want that energy for myself. Well, right now, machines don't eat cows, but we do. So we don't even have the same food source. But we might compete on, silicon chips and, nuclear fusion reactors and that sort of thing, and data centers. But again, there's a lot more resources in space. So then the only other point of contention that we might have with this digital global superorganism would be an ideological difference. And that would be like, hey, we have decided as humans that we just hate machines and we want to eradicate machines, or vice versa, where the superintelligence says we hate humans and we think the universe would be better off without humans. If it makes that decision, we could be screwed. But there's a lot of reasons to believe that the universe is actually better with us in it, from mathematical perspectives, from the intrinsic value of life, and so on and so forth. So I'm not too worried. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking to people and reading about it. So I'm not worried. I don't know if that gives anyone else any comfort, but that's where I'm at.
So one thing I want to kind of explore, because I think there was a link or a step there, was like I like the idea of the internet as this current existing superorganism where instead of a brain having individual nodes, we now have billions of people interacting. So I kind of like that idea. And going from the lizard brain of like just pure consumption, where just wants eyeballs and attention, to them a million, what would that look like? Like I'm trying the first thing that came to my mind was like, I have consciously, me as an individual, decided to use Facebook less. Because if I go to Facebook, I get into like this doom scrolling thing and I'm there for way too long. And I don't feel good about myself. So I still have it on my phone, but I use it less. Would this be like a collective, like majority of humanity gets to a point where they realize that social media isn't healthy? Is it like, what would an example of that step from lizard brain to mammalian brain, from thinking fast to thinking slow,
right?
A big example for the internet now.
Yep. Yeah. So there's taking a step back. There's a lot to unpack here. Concepts like limbic hijacking to attention economy, and also living very deliberately. And so, yes, like one of the things that the internet has generated is this wisdom that the internet itself, as it exists today, is kind of a mixed blessing, right? You can use it for scientific research. You can use it for business and commerce. You can also use it to get addicted to all kinds of stuff. And even as a YouTuber, there are people that are like, that watch my channel because it makes them angry or anxious. And I'm like, guys, why are you doing this to yourself? Like if something I say like makes you upset, like I don't need your subscription. Like, do something more constructive with your time. But again, that is the algorithm that is feeding them something that drives engagement. That's all that the algorithm cares about right now. And so the algorithm says, hey, whatever captures your attention for whatever reason that it doesn't care. All it's looking at is those numbers. So it's the question, and this is, my wife actually helped me articulate this. What is it that you're trying to optimize for? So when you made the decision to use Facebook less, what number were you trying to change in your life? Were you trying to lower your blood pressure, have more time, less time angry? Like there's something that you're trying to optimize for. And so the internet, with the reptilian version of the internet, all that it's trying to optimize for is attention. So attention engineering, attention economy, creating, outrage culture, cancel culture, all that fun stuff, addiction culture, burnout culture. Like all of those are consequences of the reptilian brain, where it's just like, hey, this organism got really good at getting your attention. So the next layer is only just now emerging. And, I'm not going to make any claims to be able to predict more than 3 to 6 months into the future. But one of the tools that I've been talking about lately a lot is Perplexity. So for anyone who's not familiar, Perplexity is the next generation of search engine, where it uses large language models. It uses the latest, like the engines that drive ChatGPT and some of the other AI chatbots today. But what it does is you interact with this chatbot, and it executes a whole bunch of searches for you, reads a whole bunch of sources, and then formats the information for you in a very nicely curated and formatted space. And so not only does it save you literally hours, but it also keeps your blood pressure in check, because it's not going to just give you the most hyperbolic, SEO optimized news article or video. It's going to read through a bunch of stuff, look at different perspectives and say, okay, here's a more nuanced view. And so this is more where it's starting to develop, the internet itself and our interaction with it, our relationship, is starting to be a little bit more controlled, curated, a little bit more deliberative. And so I think this is kind of a clue of what's coming, where rather than just the algorithm, again, SEO, that's another kind of algorithm. Mm-hmm. Rather than optimizing for that, you're optimizing for something else. You're optimizing for downloading the correct information or information that is closer to the truth, rather, more epistemic rather than more limbic in nature. So that's that's just the first step. Far be it from me to predict exactly how it's going to turn out.
Okay, this is the first time I have felt even slightly worried about my own job. Where all the AI, everything I've seen with ChatGPT, I'm not worried. Like, there's a level of me learning about my clients, learning their lifestyle, helping be that filter for them. Like, there's so much noise about finance. Like, you ignore most of it. Here are the two things you need to focus on. I'll distill it down for you to help me make this decision. Like, yes, there's a avoiding process by analysis. I will explain everything in a depth that you want, but here we need to make an A or B decision.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then I'll bring something to a client that they never heard of. And this is the first time that this perplexity, that sounds pretty close.
It's interesting, David, because when ChatGPT 3.5 hit, I'm like, okay, maybe this is like an intern you hire that you can't trust at all, but maybe it'll do something useful every now and then. And then, when ChatGPT 4 hit, I'm like, okay, maybe this is like an entry-level employee. He's just starting on the job. He's still got to double check. But after some while and you get used to working together, you might get some useful help. But yeah, Perplexity sounds like a more seasoned helper in your arsenal of employees.
Yep. Now, what I will say is it's not perfect. I married a librarian, so literally this is what she studying precision recall, relationship with information. I showed her this tool and she loves it. She thinks it's great. But even still, it makes mistakes. Some of those are structural, architectural, design decisions that the company behind it made. There's if they were to consult with me, there's a few improvements that I would make. But then also some of it is decisions that you have to make with respect to just what epistemic framework do you use to discern what is true versus, how do you decide, is this information reliable, yes or no? If there is disagreement between sources, how do you reconcile those, or how do you even present that? And this tool is still very, very new in the grand scheme of things. But it as a first generation tool, it is a sign of what is to come. Now, for your job specifically, one thing that I will hopefully give you some comfort is many humans will always prefer that human level interaction. Mm-hmm. That hey, you have been through what I am going through, and no amount of machine telling me this is what you should do will be the correct choice. Right, and at the same time, you can use these tools to do a lot of research, to get a lot of information. But this is one of the reasons that I decided to become a communicator, is because a machine might be able to give you the facts, but it's never going to tell you how to feel. Some people would prefer to get their emotions from machines, but I don't think that that's most humans. Who knows? Time will tell.
Go ahead, Trishul.
Oh, so before we leave the topic of alignment, you had mentioned you're less concerned about alignment, especially longer term alignment, because there's a good sense that the machines and the humans will likely have interests that are compatible. That does kind of make sense to me, but then there's still that lone wolf human who is mad at the world, but still has this powerful technology. Granted, they have the internet today, but we're talking about something vastly more powerful than that. How do you think that's being addressed currently?
Yeah. So it's the same thing as any arms race. Whether it is, if you outlaw guns, then only outlaws have guns. These technologies are going to be used by everyone. People in the cybersecurity space are already starting to add artificial intelligence to either firewalls or log analysis. And as a former infrastructure engineer, I will tell you that 99.999% of security logs never get audited. With generative AI, you can now audit 100% of all logs that are generated in your infrastructure, which will do great things for hardening cybersecurity infrastructure from hackers, from other kinds of, or even not even just hackers, just honest to goodness mistakes happens more often than not. And so in this case, in this kind of arms race, where there's Russian troll farms and Chinese troll farms, and I'm sure America has troll farms too, they're going to, of course, be augmented by AI, but then you have the offense. The best offense is a good defense, and vice versa. So, it's just adding more fuel to the fire. But here's where I think that there will be a structural difference, and that is that speed counts here. In fact, speed might be the most important thing, or one of the most important things. Obviously, it's like speed and intelligence. But Microsoft they just announced that they're going to build $100 billion data center called Stargate. They're probably going to be running more beneficent services than malignant services. And so even if someone has the source code for AGI, they're not going to have the compute power to run it at the same speed that the good guys are going to be able to run it at. So again, it's kind of a self-limiting thing, because if, say for instance, you want to spin up a botnet, right? And you have your home laptop versus all of the, super powerful like Cisco UCS chassis running, ACS software in a data center, you're just not going to be able to compete. You're trying to punch above your weight. Now, does that mean that doesn't mean that there's not going to be mistakes, exploits here and there? But again, zero-day exploits, that's nothing new. That's kind of run of the mill in terms of cybersecurity. So again, just from my perspective, I can imagine plenty of ways of hardening infrastructure, either with or without the advancement of artificial intelligence. But by virtue of being on the side of safety, security, and justice, and whatever else, you're going to have access to more compute resources than nefarious actors.
I think just to linger on this for a little bit more. So the example I put in a previous episode was, today you have all of these, mass shootings by like children who go into like schools and they shoot it up. And, probably the most damage they can do is how many people can you shoot with an AR-15 or something like that. But right. Now imagine that same individual has access to super intelligence on his phone that he was able to hack and jailbreak to do whatever he wants. Is that enough for just one human to be able to snake around whatever protections are in place?
I doubt it. I mean, again, there's gonna be early, mistakes that are made, but just like when some of the first people who compromised, the phone systems, they did it with the, Captain Crunch, they did it with a whistle from children's cereal. Those kinds of vulnerabilities get fixed pretty quickly, and then the threshold. The barrier of entry goes up and up and up over time. So if there are, go ahead.
I was going to say, even with like open source code on actually the architecture and the framework for modifying whatever security checks are in place, it can still be locked down.
Yeah. So, I mean, diving into cybersecurity for a minute, there are plenty of best practices and hardening guides in terms of the way that you segment networks, so that so just say, for instance, one of the most basic rules of thumb is you usually have an out-of-band network. And so an out-of-band network is a secret network that only administrators or super users have access to, that are themselves isolated from the internet. And what I mean is, when I say isolated, it's not even that you have to like pass through a firewall that you can hack through. There is no connection to the internet. So that means these out-of-band networks, those are the management networks that run all the servers, that control all the security appliances, that control all of the switches. And so there's not actually, unless you've done something wrong with your network architecture, which there are people that have, but most organizations are compliant, or mostly compliant, with these kinds of best practices. That means it doesn't matter how good of a hacker you are, you would need to physically be in the data center or physically connected to that network somewhere in order to get into that. And that's just one example of many best practices that are out there. The Department of Defense has what they call defense in depth, model, which is one that I'm particularly a fan of, and there's plenty of other best practice frameworks out there for cybersecurity. Which, if you just follow those, enable multi-factor authentication, number of other things, like that does a lot to really, really raise the bar of getting through some of these defenses.
I have been arguing that we're fine, so I appreciate the support, David.
Now, I will say that we are probably going to be fine, but the caveat that here is not the technology; it's people. People are the biggest risk.
Yeah.
In the technology space, we have a few tongue-in-cheek things for this. So there's PEBCAC, which is problem exists between the keyboard and chair, so the human user, and then there's also a layer 8 issue, which that's a reference to OSI model. So layer 7 is the application, and layer 8 it doesn't really exist, but that's the user. So human frailty is far and away the greatest risk here.
Yeah.
Whether it's greed or stupidity or just ignorance or, again, plain vanilla mistakes, it happens. But we are the weakest link by far in terms of our own safety.
You know, what comes to mind in those scenarios are, you probably heard about those near misses with like nuclear disasters and wars and stuff like that, where maybe like half a dozen times in the last 100 years, we've come so close to all out Armageddon, and it was stopped just because of some random happenstance that could have easily gone the other way. And it just makes you think, well, if this is going to be more prevalent and ubiquitous with technology, there might be more opportunities for just these small little things to slip through that could cause fundamental disaster.
It's possible, certainly, and that possibility of things slipping through the cracks, that likelihood is much higher when things are new. But what you'll notice about some of those stories, like, I just heard, I don't know if this one is true, but one of the stories is like a very drunk Richard Nixon ordered a nuclear strike on North Korea when North Korea shot down some spy drone or whatever back in the, I guess, late 60s. And then Henry Kissinger said, put him to bed. Let's see if he still wants to nuke them in the morning. I don't know if that story is true, but the mental image is perfect. So I'm gonna in my personal view, that's a true story. But that kind of mistake, like, is not, like, there are more security interlinks that have been added since then for using nuclear weapons. In the same respect, as people start getting their hands on artificial intelligence and using it to hack and using it to try and make bioweapons or whatever, we're going to discover what to tamp down sooner rather than later.
I think it's almost like a probability function of, like, most people when driving down the street aren't trying to get in an accident. The vast majority of people want to keep themselves alive, and so one of the ways they do that is just drive on the correct side of the road to the country you're in, and like everyone's safe that way. And so we have like the vast majority are trying to do the right thing, and there's enough people trying to counter those who aren't, those few bad actors. That's been like part of my argument with Trishul, that, and your computing power example is a better specific argument for me, that the singular bad actors, that they'll have trouble overcoming resources, both in terms of actual people trying to fight that and the computing power itself.
Right. And you're not talking like just a handful of orders of magnitude. You're talking about like maybe 6 orders of magnitude in terms of compute resources available on the good guys' side versus the bad guys' side. And so it's not even remotely in the same weight class. Now, again, when you're talking at state level, Russia and China and America, that's a different thing. But to the context of this particular segment of the discussion was one lone wolf actor. Great power competition is a very, very different animal.
Well, that's a can of worms, because it just opened my mind on. So the first.
I don't want to go down there, but
yeah. So basically, the first state that gets super intelligence, does that mean vastly more amounts of trouble?
So it could. And so going back to kind of my original model, which is like, as the number of options goes up, the amount of chaos that is possible also goes up. there's taking a step back, there's what's called a race condition. And so race condition is, you've seen this when people have like run to the patent office, whoever files the patent first, that's a physical race condition. Then you probably remember Dante's Peak and Volcano. They came out at about the same time.
Yes.
And then Armageddon and Deep Impact. That was a Hollywood race condition where they had similar scripts and they were trying to rush them, to release them. Race conditions happen all the time. They happen on the tech space, where you might have one database trying to reconcile with another, and they get stuck in a race condition until one of them crashes. All kinds of race conditions exist. So right now, the race condition is not just between Silicon Valley competitors, Microsoft, Google, AI, Apple, not AI, but the FANGs, right? So they're locked in a race condition, and that necessitates acceleration. But then at the same time, America and China are the two primary heavyweights that are competing for silicon dominance and AI dominance. Now, is it a first across the finish line? Not really. There is always a first mover advantage, just like how OpenAI and Microsoft are still, mostly head and shoulders above the competition because they were the first movers. But now Google is catching up. Anthropic has actually surpassed GPT-4 on most benchmarks. So the first mover advantage seems like it's not quite as profound or durable in the AI space as it once was. But we've seen this before. It's another arms race. Will it ever escalate from a Cold War to a hot war? Hopefully not. But that is still within the realm of possibilities.
Okay, now you gave me some evidence. You gave Trishul some ammo. Like, okay, I feel like you're not actually. Now you're back to not helping as much.
It's the more you know, the more complicated it is, and there are no easy answers, unfortunately.
Because as you were mentioning, the race condition between the FANGs, it just made me think, well, then if they're racing towards that goal, are they compromising safety? Because you're pretty much incentivized to go as quick as possible towards the goal, and any deviation will lead to, less chances of coming out ahead.
Sure. So, yes, that is definitely a possibility. We've seen corporations do this since the dawn of corporations,
right? Yeah.
Where if there is some economic advantage, if there is some incentive, some reward for cutting corners, corporations do it. I actually have a book on my bookshelf behind me. It was about the East India Company, one of the first modern corporations, almost 500 years ago. Mm-hmm. And one of the lawyers said the corporation has no body to be punished and no soul to be sent to hell, and it acts accordingly. It is still true 5 centuries later. So you can't corporations will do whatever they are legally allowed to do until they are punished, and they have very amoeba-like intelligence as well. They just consume and grow. It's grow or die. And so because of that, corporations will keep doing what they're going to be doing. And, you guys have probably seen, and much of your audience has probably seen, all last year, Sam Altman was going around the entire world talking to Congress, talking to world leaders saying, regulate us. You have to stop us because we can't stop ourselves. And what he was referring to is this race condition. And so the only thing that can slow down companies is the big bad government and, the Justice Department and lawsuits and that sort of stuff. Because that is something that creates a kind of a blanket over the whole thing. Because if the regulators come in, and I'm not saying that more government is always better. That's not what I'm saying. Because it can certainly be done wrong as well, and often is. Look at Boeing. Boeing is a prime example of regulation going wrong. Now that's not to forgive Boeing. They are also fully responsible for hatches blowing off of airplanes. I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that? Hang on a second.
Government regulation.
Yeah. So now there is one other big caveat to that, and that is that even governments are not incentivized to put on the brakes. Why? Because America is still competing with China. So it behooves America to still go as fast as possible without causing a meltdown. And so this is why on my channel and my audience, I always say acceleration is the default policy. Like, if you do nothing else, acceleration is just the natural forces playing out because it's a gold rush right now.
Yeah. Then it begs the question of, okay, acceleration is the default policy. If we let off the gas, it may let other states, take advantage of the situation. And then at the same time, there's always that problem with regulation of regulatory capture. And also, we're dealing with a technology that's so novel and new. How can a government that's still thinking in terms of calculators and, I don't know, abacuses come up with some sort of policy that can stay present given all of these changes and these competing concerns? And then obviously, yes, the regulatory capture is still going to be there.
Yep. Yeah, because even if Sam Altman, for instance, is as ethical and beneficent as he says he is, that doesn't mean that every other CEO is. And so if one way to think of it is, if you're going to be the morally upstanding guy, then the guy who's not is just going to kneecap you, right? He's just going to hit you in the leg and say, "Oh, look what happened. Oh no, darn, we're in the lead now. Sorry." So it's very difficult and messy to manage, and the stakes are very high. I mean, it's not just a matter of like, so the carrot is like, why are we doing this? It's the amount of wealth that could be generated. Mm-hmm. It's the paradigm shift that human society might go through. It's the scientific breakthroughs that we want. Like, there's a very compelling case to get there. So that's a very compelling stick, or a carrot rather. But the stick is, if it comes down wrong, it's going to break bones, or worse.
So how are we doing with the regulation?
Well, we're not yet. Okay. Like in America, we're not yet. Like there is like the EU AI Act. I don't even know if it's been implemented, but it just passed like in the last few months. Europe is always much more proactive than America. So a lot of this has yet to be litigated. I don't think we've yet seen a landmark Supreme Court case make any decisions about generative AI. Most of the court cases have come down favoring generative AI, in terms of, okay, if you use copyrighted material to train, you're not necessarily responsible for that. We'll see if that stands. But certainly it hasn't. No court decisions have been made. Most of it is being handled privately. So we had the Screen Actors, SAG-AFTRA. Yeah. They were boycotting AI, and that was resolved privately. So a lot of the regulation is just doesn't exist at the state level yet. Now, what I will say, this went completely under the radar, but I think it was back in January. President Biden actually had a call with Xi Jinping over in China, and one of the things that they talked about was they agreed on a few red lines about AI. And so I don't know why no one reported on that. I haven't gotten around to reporting on it yet on my channel. But when world leaders, particularly the two heavyweights, talk to each other and they say, yes, we agree that this is a risk, let's cooperate and make sure we do it right, that tells me that like, okay, hopefully things go in the right direction. Now, granted, there was the red line between Washington and Moscow during the height of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. So just because the world leaders are talking doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go well. But it's better that they're talking than they're not. Because if it's like, hey, was that you? No, it wasn't me. Okay, cool. Let's throw a bucket of cold water on it before it gets worse.
Okay. So I did want to try to get back to the start. We'll talk about the fourth industrial revolution and bringing it all back down. Like, so you mentioned some of the connections with quantum computing, biotechnology. Like, what do you envision, or not necessarily envision, like, what are some more practical applications, either for us as financial advisors or our clients in just regular lives, either kind of now or you can see it relatively soonish?
Well, so on the most practical level is like, I'm gonna have to quote from Brian Johnson. He's the rejuvenation guy. Stay alive. Like, just stay alive for the next 10 years, and the rest is going to be really super interesting. That's like the best advice. And as I've come to live and breathe and embody that, it's just like, you know what? This is the coolest time to be alive. So take care of your health. Stay employed as long as you can. Employment is still really low right now, or unemployment. Sorry, unemployment is still low. Employment is still high right now. enjoy it while it lasts, but we are living through as far as I can tell, the last gasp of this current neoliberal paradigm. And 20 years from now, it's probably going to be a different world. It's going to be like the difference between 1900 and 1920. That was before cars, and then full industrialization happened in the space of 20 years. And then the next 20 years, it could be an even bigger paradigm shift than that.
Do you have like a specific? I'm not going to hold you to it. Like a specific guess, like something. Could be like the one I think is like truck drivers being gone with driverless cars. Like that.
Right.
That job just no longer exists. Like, do you have anything else that you have seen that you feel comfortable? Like this is kind of there now, or really soon.
The first one that is dying already is call centers. So there's been plenty of stories out there in the ether of companies laying off 90% of their call center staff because it can either be handled. You either completely subvert the need for the call center with intelligent chatbots, so you just hop on the app or exchange some text messages. Some of my former consulting clients, that's some of the stuff that I helped them with, which was how to interpret the data of like, hey, we have a text message based chatbot, and what you're doing is you're just avoiding call volume completely, or you can automate the calls with digital voice and that sort of stuff. In which case, you still net effect is the same. You don't need the human there. So that seems like the very first one to really just categorically, it's going to be a thing of the past sooner or later. Beyond that, I've heard that translators are rapidly, like all their work is drying up. A lot of SEO people, some of the people that I've worked with, they were in SEO and copywriting and marketing copy. A lot of that is going the way of the dinosaurs pretty quickly. Now, what I will, well, part of it is because it's all data driven. So it's like let's say you just have ChatGPT or GPT-4, whatever language model, generate 8 different versions of marketing copy, A/B test all of them. It'll optimize it faster than any human could. And so it's just no amount of human expertise can keep up with that. Now, a human might be able to have the vision for the whole project, but it's at the low level, the copywriters and the marketers and the SEO engineers, that can all be fully automated, often to a higher degree. Actually, YouTube, they're about to roll out some automated SEO tools to help you optimize your titles, optimize your thumbnails. Unfortunately, I didn't get invited to the private beta because I don't think I'm a big enough YouTuber, but I got the email. They told us that it's coming if you're a creator on YouTube. So it's like, and so then you have this service that would have cost you $10,000 a year for free built into the platform.
Okay. So going back, is my job safe? Is Trishul's job safe?
As long as there is money, people will want to talk to you, if I had to guess. Now, will there be services that subvert the need for some of what you offer? Probably. But I would suspect that as long as there's money, there's going to be people who want to talk to other people about money to help them with financial planning. Because again, there is in some of my videos, I've created there's a few classes of jobs that I think are going to be pretty robust. And so one class of job is statutory jobs. And so as far as I know, you guys are licensed, right? Like you have to have you have an accreditation. The state says, rubber stamp, you're allowed to do this. So that's a statutory job. So lawyers, accountants, financial planners, engineers, a lot of certified engineers, professional engineers. I think I already said doctors. Anyways, you get the idea. Airline pilots. There are a lot of jobs that by definition, the law says a human has to do it. A licensed human has to do it. Now, does that mean that it's going to be there forever? No, but at least for the foreseeable future, the status quo is a licensed human has to do that. Now, you guys will probably be using these tools. A bunch of my lawyer friends are already using AI-enabled tools, which means that they're not hiring paralegals, for instance, or they're not hiring vendors. So another class of jobs that's going to stick around is the meaning jobs. So this is me. I have joined the meaning economy. And that is because humans are biologically wired to understand stories and narratives and meaning from other humans. And so until human biology changes, like I'm in a good spot. And you guys as podcasters, like you're part of the meaning economy as well, because you're telling your audience, like, okay, this is what all of this means to you. So you're
actually
twice
that's probably
covered
even
there.
more direct for us. That's
Yeah,
even more direct for us
exactly.
because that's what our individual conversations with clients are.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the meaning part is actually more important to our clients than the statutory part.
Yeah. Well, yeah, from a subjective perspective, but from the state perspective, you're
Yeah.
also like, because there's no legal requirement that a human, and I actually there are AI channels that I'm already competing with, that the script, the video, the audio, it's all generated by AI, and some of them have more subscribers than I do, and I'm like, well, that sucks. But at the same time, a lot of my audience does prefer, they're like, hey, we know and trust Dave. We want to hear what Dave has to say.
Okay.
And I'm sure most of your audience feels the same way. So joining the meaning economy, that's going to be a pretty durable thing for maybe forever, honestly. As long as there are humans, there's probably going to be a desire for getting meaning from other humans.
Okay.
And then the third main class is experience jobs. So this is stuff like tour guides, massage therapists, baristas, the kind of stuff that where, again, you want that human-to-human interaction, whatever it happens to be. There's a few other classes, but I think those are the three primary big ones.
So the way we kind of went through it in one of our earlier conversations, it may have actually even been our last one, is on, you mentioned that like 20-year time frame, but then maybe after that, we're in that new paradigm. And there might come a point where effectively the AIs, and we also threw in the robots and the Tesla bot and the GPT powered autonomous robots and things like that. And we kind of figured, well, at some point they should be able to do anything that humans can do. And then the question turned to, okay, what's left for humans? We kind of dovetailed that discussion with the notion of, well, yeah, maybe our optimization function needs to shift, kind of thinking or tying back to earlier in this conversation, maybe the new optimization function isn't, engagement with social media, but maybe it's how do I maximize my own personal happiness over my entire life? Like that can be my new optimization, not tied to survival or not tied to pretty much anything that humans used to tie their meaning to. But now it's just really personal.
Yeah, we end up going through Maslow's hierarchy of needs and like realize that we've already like taken care of the bottom level, and like AI and robots probably take care of the next level. Like we're already at those kind of top three levels. And when I first heard you talk about the fourth industrial revolution, that was one of the things that came to mind. And Trishul and I've had similar conversations in the past where they're just like, we'll play around with, what if you're gonna live forever? Like, what if you knew you couldn't die, kind of thing. The UBI idea, universal basic income. Like, what if you didn't have to work? What if we get to this post-work idea? Like, is everyone gonna be an artist? Like, do people? There's still engineers if no one has to work, kind of thing. Like, And so, I'd love if you had some kind of connection to what you mentioned earlier about like that, what we're close to now, those like parallel paths of the fourth industrial revolution to what that might mean for humanity, I guess, like at a broad sense.
Well, okay, so some good news for the VC and other investors in your audience. As long as there is money and capital, there will be capitalists. Like there are always resources to be economized, to be developed. I suspect that corporations, as we know them, are going to change. Some people have been talking about like, oh, we're going to see our first, unicorn corporation with only a single, proprietor in the next few years. Corporations are probably going to look different, but capital is not going anywhere. So that aspect of human endeavors probably not going to change. Our relationship to capital, I think, will also change. And so what I mean is, one project that I would do if I had the money and the connections right now is I would create a hyperlocal securities market where you could invest in literally any resource in the world. You could invest in a lake, a river, a data center, any farm, any store, any real estate, and just bring everything into the market so that everyone can participate in this abundance of wealth that we're building. I don't know if that idea would work, So that I don't think is going to change. At least not on a fundamental level. Your interaction with capital is probably going to evolve with a combination of blockchain, tokenization, cryptocurrency, and all that fun stuff. Who knows how it's going to shake out? There's a lot of potential there for it. Now, for everyone else, though, because if you don't have anything that you can offer of economic value, like say, for instance, someone is not able to join the meaning economy, or it doesn't have a statutorily protected job, or is not interested in being a barista, or joining the experience economy, there might be new economic segments that are created. The meaning economy is one of the newest ones. Although you can say that it has existed for a long time, as long as there's been poets, there's been a meaning economy. But it's going to be bigger, right? There's more YouTubers than ever before. There's more TikTokers than ever before. So what does everyone else do? So this has actually been the heart of my work over the last couple months. And so, I've talked to people about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Another framework called self-determination theory, which basically says that one of the things that people are trying to optimize for is autonomy and mastery and a few other things. I don't remember that full framework off the top of my head. Another one is choice theory, which is understanding why people make certain choices. They make choices to optimize for relationships. They make choices to optimize for novelty or experience and those sorts of things. But none of those really resonated with me. I looked across the entire landscape that I could find. I even looked at ancient Chinese and ancient Japanese theory, philosophy. Yeah. What was that?
Ikagi, I think.
Ikigai.
I think I know what you're talking about. What's that again?
Yep. Ikigai. Or Ikigai. Yep.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
I looked at all of these things, and there's a lot of wisdom in all of them. So I drew from all of those. And the current model that I have is what I call radical alignment. And so radical alignment is one of the first principles is body first living. So that is align your life with what your body needs and wants. And so, like, I haven't used alarm clocks in years. I sleep until I wake up. And now I wake up at like 5 a.m. naturally. You align with the diet that your body wants. You spend time in nature. You get the exercise that your body is optimized for. And so by restructuring your life around what your body needs as kind of the foundation, you're going to be healthier, more energetic, all of those good things. But you're also going to be happier. Time in nature is one of the most critical things for being happy, for just feeling happy. Like this morning, I was grumpy because I didn't get quite enough sleep, and I had some drama to deal with, as an internet creator does. And so then I went to the gym, and then my wife texted me, and she's like, "Hey, let's go for a walk." So then we went for an hour-and-a-half hike, and I felt great. Well, not great. I was still a little bit tired, but I felt much better afterwards.
So
that's
just to interject real quick. If I apologize if this is too personal. If you want to punt on it, I will not be offended. Do you have kids?
No. So there's that.
For me, I have to set my alarm to make sure my kids get to school on time. Now, again, like I don't want to get into like the homeschooling theory right now, but like just kids and other societal like obligations.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have to meet for softball practice that I coach at 4:30. Right.
Sure.
I can't like get to it eventually, kind of like, and so this like social construct still creates this need, and for me personally, I imagine it's for most parents, of these like time constraints.
Right.
And so
one thing I would ask is, do you think that waking children up to get to school is aligned with your children's physical needs?
Again, I didn't want to get to the homeschool idea. I acknowledge probably not.
Right.
I also, I'm going to try and cut this off quickly.
Okay.
I don't want to be my kid's teacher. Like for me, and my wife and I, we've had conversations like this. We do not enjoy that part of the parenting.
Sure.
We want them to go to teachers and also get that social interaction from classrooms.
Right. So what I mean, and I didn't mean to like angle it towards stay-at-home, teaching or unschooling, but rather, what if we were to start reorganizing not just our individual lives, but all of society around our animal needs first? That's what I mean by
radical alignment. I acknowledge that. Again, I appreciate you trying to get there. Yep. I think not everyone gets up at 5 a.m., so they can't get to school at 7 a.m. when I really want to sleep till 8 a.m. instead of 9.
Right.
But yeah.
Aaron, I'm going to push back on you because I'm in David's camp. As you know, I may have mentioned this. I don't use an alarm either, and I haven't for over a decade. Even with a small kid, it's possible.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I guess the final point is maybe 7 a.m. for school is not the appropriate time, and that's a relatively simple thing to change. But I do what I will acknowledge is that there are many social constructs. Whether it's softball practice or getting to work on time or those sorts of things. But on an individual level, people can start to make some of these decisions. And in the long run, I think we're going to kind of look at each other and say, why are we doing it this way? Because here's one thing that kind of comes to mind as someone who I used to be married to an educator, and I've interviewed a lot of educators. The reason that school starts so early is tied back to the early industrial revolution. The reason that we still have a summer break is because most children worked on the farms. So we have so much inertia and so many paradigms that we've forgotten why we're even doing it that way. But we can let that go because I appreciate there's plenty more to talk about.
Trish and I have had multiple hours of conversation on education specifically.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you can't, that is a can of worms, and it's, people have strong feelings, so I understand.
But tell me more about the radical alignment after the body first.
Yeah. So the next part is, and this is a work in progress. So the part 2 is radical alignment with the heart, and so that is love, passion, values, and mission. Those are the 4 components of aligning with the heart. And so I think you guys will appreciate this part. You guys are living your mission, right? Like I think Trishul, you said like you don't have to be here, but this is what you want to be doing. So this is aligned to like what you truly want to be doing. And then whether you feel like it's your passion or your mission, whatever it happens to be, it is aligned with your higher purpose or your true self. And then whether you call it love, passion, mission, whatever. But then there's also alternative lifestyles. So, for instance, I sold my house in the suburbs, and I moved out to a rural house. And now one of the things that my wife and I are exploring is maybe we're just going to like renovate a camper van and just live out of that. Like, so we're saying there is no physical reason that we need a house. So what if we realign our life to be more nomadic so that we can go on the adventures that we want to go on? And that's just one example of how you might radically realign your life to who it is that you really want to do, and to have who you want to be, and where you want to go and what you want to do with your life. And that I think is a lot of people are not yet aware, because we have so much inertia in our lives individually and socially. And there's so many affordances, there's so many laws and regulations and permits and zoning and everything that just says, the default path is you end up in a single family home in the suburbs. This is a really unnatural situation. Humanity did not, I mean, I guess there were suburbs in Rome, but that was about it. But suburbs, like relatively new invention, single family nuclear homes, relatively new invention. And I think on balance, we would decide that it was probably not a good invention, but this is where that idea of the superorganism, because the suburbs were designed by capitalism. Capitalism said, hey, we need a way to have people close to work centers and also have something with good resale value. So what did it invent? It invented suburbs, not optimized for human well-being, not optimized for happiness, not even optimized for children. In an ideal world, children probably don't even need to go to school. You live in a village, and your children stay in your social context. So that kind of radical alignment is what I would be really looking for in the long run. And then the third one is radical alignment with nature. So that's human nature, with the environment, with the natural forces of human society, natural forces of evolution, just aligning the way that we live individually and the way that we are progressing as a species, aligning it with all of those natural forces and kind of more going with the flow. And so that's a radical alignment in a nutshell that I'm working on.
Okay. Like you said, I appreciate that you mentioned several other philosophies you looked into, because we have talked about that relatively in depth in past conversations. So
yeah.
I guess my first thought, it's almost getting back to like that internet as a super organism idea. It's like it does feel like a little bit of this was how society evolved. Like the small point, like nitpicking, like I wouldn't necessarily agree that suburbs were created. Like the second part is to create value. Like I agree, like they want to be close enough to work, but I would have said they would still want to have some piece of land and or yard like that's their own kind of thing. And maybe there's a value idea, like they want the benefits of rural but still close to work in the cities kind of thing is what they're trying to find, that middle ground.
Right.
And it feels like I don't think it was pushed on society. I think it was presented, and a lot of people like found that appealing, and so has become more and more appealing. I do like the idea of kind of questioning how that fits in capitalism. Like I do like the idea of the classic American dream of like you get married, have kids, buy a house. Like a lot of times I question that part. We don't need to buy a house. I have tried to stress to my clients, buying a house is a commitment to location more than anything else. Like even in the Bay Area, if you buy a house in San Francisco, that's a long commute to Palo Alto, or vice versa, where there's a lot of jobs. So I don't behoove them to like avoid suburbs, but buying versus renting is like a different idea, that like commitment location versus location independence. And so I think, because that's like a small like problem, like with that logical thing. It's like I still think that people want that sense of community and not someone like an upstairs neighbor.
Right.
And so that's like both of those I feel like appeal to a lot of people. And I'm kind of curious, like where you think that would fit in.
So to make sure I understand, do you mean like how would we get community in a world of radical alignment, or how does that, or are you looking at the current paradigm?
A little bit of both. Like so a little bit of both. It would be like one, we can't make all these changes tomorrow, but I don't think that the radical alignment, I don't think like all of these things are bad. That kids going to school, I agree education can be changed somewhat, but I do appreciate like the social interaction and other benefits that school provides. And so I'm willing to set my alarm to send my kids to school, because I think that I am happier and my kids are happier than the alternative of kids.
What is the alternative?
Some kind of unschooling, or some kind of like not setting alarm, but I'm now responsible for their education as their parents, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, I would just start school later. I would just say school starts at 10. That's the only change that I would make.
I do think, especially in winter, like you start to get to like daylight hour concerns. Like, again, for me in particular, I gotta get softball practice in after school and before it's dark.
Well, Aaron, you're forgetting you have the AI robot to do, take the kid to school and to teach the kid till they're 10, and
so that'd be like. But again, I do think that. So we're like you're roaming around in the RV. I believe I'm butchering the paraphrasing, but are you worried that you lose a sense of community? Because I think in most of those other classic philosophies, time with friends and family, having a sense of community, were really, really important to happiness and well-being.
Yep.
And so in your example, is that a concern of yours?
So one counterfactual: suburbs are not the best way to get community. Not for everyone.
I agree. Cities tend to be much stronger at that. I acknowledge that. Yes.
Yeah. So walkable cities as something that I think we could invest in. One problem, whether it's with cities or suburbs, is, and I have to be very delicate about how I present this, is it's kind of a crapshoot as to what neighborhood you end up in and who your neighbors are, as to whether or not you get along. because you're not allowed to pre-select for that. You're not allowed to pre-select for many demographic things for equal housing opportunity reasons, and protecting that because you don't want to allow discrimination. But at the same time, you're not even allowed to ask like, hey, what are the values of my neighbors? Unless you go knock on doors and say, hey, I'm trying to move into the neighborhood. But beyond that, you don't really have that much of a choice to be intentional about community building today. Now, to answer your counterfactual about living more nomadically, for me, for who I am as a person and who my wife is as a person, it would actually be a better source of community for us because, like, my brother and sister-in-law want to do the same thing, and there's also communities built around either that kind of more nomadic lifestyle. There's tiny home communities that we can visit. There's like all kinds of campsites that we would go to and build a community in a lifestyle that is more aligned with what we really want and how we prefer to live. So that flexibility, like, kind of to each their own. But okay. I think that we do agree that maybe suburbs are not optimized for community. They work for some people, but I don't think they're optimized for community.
I would tend to agree with that. I think it's a again, from my perspective, like close to the city to work. Mm-hmm. You have your own space, no upstairs neighbor, and there's enough people that you can probably like organize your own community that you all meet in the same place at the same time.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple things. Thinking 20 years into the future, one of the kind of predicates one of the assumptions that I make is you might have 80% of people not working anymore in 20 or 30 years.
Okay.
And so if most people are not working, then there are no time constraints. Like, school can start whenever is best for children. Softball can happen whenever is best for people. And you allow the society to kind of naturally work itself out. And then to your point, there are relatively small changes that you could make to zoning laws to make suburbs more community friendly, requiring more shared spaces. Yeah. For instance, more pathways, more walkability. Because right now, so some of the design considerations for suburbs, very car centric. They're designed for cars. Yeah. They're designed for resale value. And to your point, like, I think that private dwellings have been around for a very long time. So yes, I would say that there is probably a human impulse or a preference, a very deep innate preference for private dwellings. But the form factor of the suburb is not optimized for community. And it wouldn't take a whole heck of a lot to change that, except and so I don't know, I guess California is probably built up, but where I'm at in North Carolina, we have developers coming in, buying up, 20 acre, 50, sometimes up to 800 acre parcels of land, and they are trying to get the most return on investment. And so that's what I mean by suburbs are optimized for economics. So they don't get extra money if they build in parks. They don't get extra money if they make it walkable. They are just trying to sell as many units as they can on postage stamps. And that's where regulation would have to come in. Or we, the people, say, I'm not going to buy a house in this soulless neighborhood.
Yeah. So I actually think that's one of the silver linings of COVID was, I think that's created, especially around here, more walkable areas where you see streets that are closed off to cars now, and you have restaurants doing outdoor dining, and that has been almost universally appreciated, and so that has stuck around pretty well.
Yep. And a lot of cities have also started investing in more green spaces and trails. Like that. So my hometown Raleigh was actually, I think it's still like number 3 growth market in the nation. And one of its primary accolades was that it's like, most playful city in America or whatever. It's not really, as a local, but we do have one of the largest greenway systems in the nation. And that was like a lifesaver for me. I could bike literally dozens of miles around everywhere along rivers. And so during COVID, that was what my wife and I did. We would walk up and down, the river trails. I'd bike 3 hours, a couple times a week, up to the lake and back. And so cities take notice, and they're like, hey, we have this unused, municipal space. Often what happens is greenways trails are built along utility lines, actually. So it's like, hey, we need to access this anyway, so let's just pave it and then say, hey, look, now we're a playful city. But that's good for people. And actually, one of the decision criteria for where we moved to was we needed access to trails. That is an economic decision that we're making as individuals. But there's something that cities and states can do to also facilitate a more pro-social kind of way of life.
Okay, so if you envision 20 years in the future, 80% of people aren't working, is the short answer just UBI? Or do you is there some other, that's a huge jump in a relative, one generation.
Yeah.
And so, I want to kind of wrap up, how would we get there if you ran the world?
Yeah. Well, so I wouldn't force it. Again, I'm a huge fan of Wu Wei, which is effortless action. That's the one of the key principles of Taoism, which is you let nature run its course. So if unemployment goes up, then what do you do? So there's a few things, some kind of redistribution policy, wealth redistribution policy, such as UBI, or negative income tax, or whatever. Freedom dividend is what what was it? Andrew Yang, the Yang Gang called it.
Oh,
yeah. So whatever you call it, some kind of wealth redistribution from the rich to the poor. Great. Yeah. That's not a complete solution, and there's a few reasons for that. One, you do not want to put all your eggs in one basket. And so the what I call that is economic agency. And I didn't invent the term. I borrowed it from 20 years ago or whenever it was originally coined. So what happens is as people lose jobs, economic agency goes down. And as economic agency goes down, political anger goes up. And so when political anger gets high enough, you either have you vote out presidents, or if it gets really high, you have revolutions. I don't think we'll get to that point because we have a relatively functioning democracy. But then it's okay, so what are people going to vote for? And what are people going to put their energy towards? And this is why I mentioned that hyperlocal securities market earlier. Because if everyone can, say, invest in data centers and robots and whatever else, all the land around them, then everyone can be a stakeholder in the new wealth generation. And what I would do if I had control of the world and we were seeing, unemployment creep up, which it might not, but if we saw that, what I would do is I would say, hey, let's reform the securities laws so that we can bring more assets and resources, so we can tokenize everything, tokenize, self-driving cars, tokenize robots, tokenize data centers, tokenize individual GPUs if you want to, put it all on a marketplace. And then what I would do is I would incentivize everyone to buy into that. Say every dollar that you put into a local investment is going to be matched by the government up until a certain point. So then everyone has a stake in the economy. And then you don't even need UBI eventually. Everyone is just a stakeholder in the entire economy. That's what I would ideally aim for. Would it work? I have no idea, but that's what I would try.
Okay. I feel like I don't want to go too much deeper. Because I feel like I can't explore that without another 20 minutes. We're already.
Oh, yeah. We can come on again and talk about it in the future if you want.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many worms that are squiggling around right now. I don't even know where to begin, but we're well. I don't know where the last hour went, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of flew by.
So I guess, do you want to wrap up with anything, Trishul? Do you have any kind of final question for Dave?
It did have to go with UBI, but maybe, just kind of thinking future of humanity as well. How does this kind of impact what it means to be human in relation to the status game? Meaning, a large part of what it meant to be human has been tied to our individual status in the past,
right?
Particularly tied to our careers and where we are in society. But if a lot of that has a lot less meaning in 20 years, what is important?
Not necessarily. I mean, costly signaling has always been a thing. It's just what is the cost? If you want to buy a brand new Mercedes, if you don't have money, you find another way to signal. You spend more time at the gym, you spend more time being smarter. If you grow up in a college town, the status game there is, how many letters do you have after your name? What's your GPA? There's all kinds of non-monetary status games that people play. In terms of having social pecking order and whatever. And pecking order is perfectly natural. That is other than the need to eat, sleep, and breathe, like we as a social animal, we will find ways to compete for status. If you're on the internet, it's how many subscribers you have. Has nothing to do with money. I mean, there is some correlation to money, but people will brag about subscriber count over everything else, or how many nations you've been to. If you're like all the younger globetrotting people, it's I have a passport and I've been to 58 nations. That becomes a new feather in their cap. So there's all kinds of non-monetary status competitions out there, and that's never going to change.
So in my mind, it feels like up until now, a large part of it has somehow been tied to, maybe even from an evolutionary standpoint, increasing your ability to pass on your genes, like higher status, better mates, right? And higher status, more money, better mates, and so on. So it all kind of ties back to that. But in like 20 years, if 80% of people don't have jobs and they're not really competing for survival anymore, you're going to pass on your genes if you want to or not. Does that change the paradigm of status?
Well, so there's several forms here. So one is sexual selection. That's who you choose to procreate with, or whether or not you choose to procreate at all. Yeah. And so physical attractiveness, health signifiers, things like clear skin and symmetrical face, symmetrical body, that's never going to change. Depending on what status game you engage with, it could be the culture, the fashion, the music that you engage with. Those are all going to be things that basically determine your market value in the dating world. Part of radical alignment, I think, is I think fewer people will be strictly monogamous, which completely changes the rules. In terms of relationships.
Talk about opening a can of worms. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, no, we can keep going all day.
Today's conversation.
Yeah. So, but I mean, people are going to find a way. Like what was it from Jurassic Park? Like life finds a way. Right. Yeah. Like we're going to figure it out. Like it's gonna play out naturally. There's nothing the state needs to do. There's nothing you or I need to do. As people find themselves in these new paradigms, we're just going to naturally adapt. I'm doing the best that I can to try and understand what those adaptations are going to be, what those forces are going to be. But it's going to play out naturally. Like, that's just the way that it goes.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Like as people identify internally, like for so long, like I'm a financial advisor. Like they identify with their job first. I think there's already seeing a shift of people like realizing they shouldn't be identifying themselves by their job.
Right.
And so you see it as just social conversations like, how do you spend your time is probably a more interesting question than what do you do? Like that's like an easy classical question. But
right.
I think that people will identify themselves as something other than the work or their career.
Yeah. And that's mostly an American phenomenon, as far as I know, or at least it's largely an American phenomenon. When I visited some friends in France 10 years ago, I didn't get asked what I did for work once, not once. People, when they said, "What do you do?" I thought that they meant work, but it was like, no, like, what do you do, like, with your life?
How do you spend your time? Yeah,
yeah. And so, France, like, some similar cultural paradigms, but also some fundamentally different paradigms in terms of how people approach life and what they value. My wife, she went to an archaeological dig in Crete, in Greece. Again, they don't care what you do. It's like, oh, you're a silly American. Okay, cool. Let me teach you all the Greek swear words. And that was like the extent of the interactions with some of the locals. It was just having a good time. They found the secret beach where all the locals like sunbathed naked, and some local fishermen like handed them some scallops fresh from the sea. Just an entirely different approach to life. I think that we Americans have a lot to learn from most of the rest of the world. Australia, Europe, a lot in Asia. Now, of course, China and Japan, they have a huge workaholic culture, worse than we do. But other places, Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, a lot of places have a very different approach to life. Pura Vida from Central and South America, again, they've already got it figured out. They're going to be fine. We're going to be the ones with the nervous breakdown when we lose our jobs. But yeah, that's kind of where I see it going.
Okay. I do want to kind of wrap us up, and I think we might have to have Dave on again.
That would be much appreciated, David.
The technology,
Yeah.
the philosophy, this is a great conversation. Thank you so much, Dave. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just let me know, and I'll look forward to hopping back on.
Thanks so much, David. And, I enjoyed the conversation as well. If you guys enjoyed it out there, do like, subscribe, and share. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of the Mind Money Spectrum podcast. Be sure to visit mindmoneyspectrum.com to access the entire library of episodes. Remember, it's not black and white, but the wide spectrum of gray area where you get to pursue the freedoms you want in life. Opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical as no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Have a nice day.